This is not the Old Sauk Trail, okay? But I am very proud of my grandchildren, and this is my youngest grandchild, and I introduce her to my audiences. Now, the grandchild is not the mother. That's my daughter, okay? And do we have any grandparents here? A few. Grandchildren are God's reward for not killing your own children when they were teenagers. Okay? So I get to show my grandchild to lots of audiences. That's Callie Cheyenne. Now, you all have maps. You should have 2 maps. If you don't, look on with your neighbor. There's one of the maps. Nope, not that one. You're going to have to share with somebody else. One of the maps is the Northwest Territory. 1787, it says at the top on the Northwest Territory came about by the Act of Congress in 1787. And it's shaped, if you'll notice, it contains what now is 5 states: Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And what I did was superimpose where the Sauk Trail goes across the state of Michigan. We are focusing tonight on the state of Michigan part of the Sauk Trail. The Sauk Trail actually goes all the way to the Quad Cities. You'll see on the Mississippi River. The Quad Cities are Davenport, Bettendorf, Moline, and Rock Island. But we're going to concentrate primarily on Michigan Sauk Trail, which is the other map. Okay? And so what we're going to do eventually, in about 5 minutes or so, we're going to go across the Sauk Trail from Detroit to New Buffalo. Now, there are 2 or 3 people in the audience who have been on a bus trip with me. These presentations have become popular enough that we now have bus trips on the Sauk Trail, which I take. And the next one is on June 21 from the Portage Senior Center. And I go, one trip goes from White Pigeon over to New Buffalo. That's the western trip. The other one, the second one I've taken, is from Coldwater to the Irish Hills, Clinton, Michigan. That's the eastern trip. And on June 21, I'm going to take the first Far East trip. And that's from Clinton all the way into Detroit, well, Dearborn at least. And it's a one-day trip. We leave about 7:30, get back about 6:30 in the evening. If you're interested, I'll take your name, phone number, and see if we can arrange a trip someday. Now, so my background has nothing to do with history, nothing to do with geography, nothing to do with geology at all. I had an abiding interest in roads and highways since I was a kid. I remember getting the Saturday Evening Post, and on one page there was always a section of a map, you know, like a microscopic section, and you had to figure out where in the United States that was, okay? And I would work on that thing for days trying to figure out where it was. And so I've always been interested in roads and highways. So when I retired 8.5 years ago from Western, my students claim I retired at least 20 years prior to that. But in December of '09, I retired, and I started taking classes. I mean, I got a resume at 6 pages thick. I don't need more classes. But I was starting to honor my avocational interest. So I took courses at Valley, Civil War, 2 Michigan history classes, state and local government, constitutional law, geography of Michigan, etc., etc. By the way, if you didn't know this, hear it now. You can take courses at Valley at no charge. If you are a senior citizen and are not employed, etc., you can take as many classes as you want, space available basis, no charge. Now, don't be like some seniors. I talked to the dean of students a few years ago, and he said, "You seniors," he was looking at me very angrily. He said, "You are taking advantage of this program." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We have senior citizens who sign up for a course, doesn't cost them anything, and they don't go to class." Really? Why not? They got their ID card and they go to the gym every day and work out. Okay? Don't be like those folks. Anyway, so I've started and I've taken classes, all kinds, Lifelong Learning Academy. Have you taken courses from Lifelong Learning? Wonderful experience, terrific. They are very low cost, non-credit producing classes that you get on the WMU website and look for Academy of Lifelong Learning classes, all kinds of courses. So, did that go on by itself? Yeah. Okay. This is a map. What I've done probably is what no historians have done. I decided instead of reading about it, I'd get on US 12, the Sauk Trail, because I heard that was an Indian trail many years ago. I come from southern Michigan. My hometown is right down here. Morenci, Michigan. 2,000 souls right on the Ohio line. I heard about this trail. So one of the Michigan history classes I did, that was my project. Okay? And so I didn't write a paper. I read thousands of papers in my day, and I said, I don't want to do that. So what I did was to give an oral project on one highway, one and one only. So I began to learn about this so-called Indian Trail that went across southern Michigan. And I just got on the highway and I started driving up and down that road. I have spent 2,500 miles traveling up and down US 12, which used to be 112 up until 1962. The original 12 came through Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, Benton Harbor. Okay, so this is a historical marker. You've seen them all over Michigan. There are hundreds of them, several in Kalamazoo. But it's the only historical marker I have ever seen that has a map on it. And this, I'm going to tell you about the map very quickly. Detroit is over here. And there are 3 major trails across the state of Michigan. They were all based upon originally Native American trails. The effect of those Native American trails has been very profound in terms of the highway system that we have in Michigan today. So, what are the trails? The one across the top is the Grand River Trail, because in Lansing, the Grand River flows right along with that Native American trail. That used to be US 16. It is now I-96. Here is another one that went from Detroit to Ypsilanti and then split off. The original name of that road is the Territorial Road. It became US 12, which was replaced, in terms of traffic at least, by I-94. So the Native American trails went into 2 or 4 lane highways and then interstate highways. The one we're going to talk about tonight is US 12, the Sauk Trail. That was not replaced by an interstate. The other ones were. Now you'll see on that, and you see on your map, there are two lines coming across here. One is a solid line that goes down and dips down near Niles, but you'll see a dotted line right beside it. Do you see it on your maps? The dotted line is where the stagecoach went pre-1900. I was not on the first stagecoach. Okay, my grandchildren claim I was. But that's the, now here's the interesting part. Here's that dotted line until it gets to Clinton, Michigan, right there. Then it dips down to Tecumseh, Michigan, and then rejoins. And I wondered why. When I see an aberration like that, I've got to figure out why would the stagecoach dip down? The reason is, this area right in here is called the Irish Hills. And they are hills. If you've been on that road, it goes up and down and winds around a great deal. Well, when you're thinking of taking a stagecoach and you've got a four-horse stage, it's very difficult for that stage to get up the hill. So what they did was take the stage route, went down here, not so hilly, and then took it over to Cambridge Junction. The Irish Hills is right in there, and we're going to see the Irish Hills in just a minute. Now, Grand Rapids is up here. You can't quite see it. Now, Grand Rapids has a very interesting name. Those rapids up there are not grand. They're decent rapids. They're nice rapids, fairly good rapids, but they ain't Grand Rapids. So where does Grand Rapids get its name? Because it's on the Grand River. That's where Grand Rapids gets its name. Rapids on the Grand. Okay, and that's right up in here. And the Grand River is the longest river in the state of Michigan. 252 miles. Okay? The longest highway in the state of Michigan is I-75, 396 miles from the Ohio line to Sault Ste. Marie. Now you're writing all this down on notes, is that correct? Because at 7:50 we do have a final exam. And you can use your notes if you wish to. Those who do not make it through the final exam, the library closes at 9 o'clock and you will be here all night long. All right, so that's how I got interested in the Sauk Trail. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start in Detroit as soon as I can figure out where my clicker is. Beth, you didn't take my clicker, did you? I have it in my hand. Yes.
Where's this marker located? Where did you find
Bronson.
it? In Bronson.
This is located just outside of Bronson. Yep, down here. Yeah, and I just found it. And I said, boy, that's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from Detroit across the state by slides. Now, this is normally a 4-hour presentation. I cut it down to about an hour, okay? So there are going to be some things I think are important that are left out, but I didn't have much choice. Now, this is one person you need to know in terms of history of the state of Michigan and the history of the Sauk Trail. This is Father Gabriel Rashard. Some of you know that there's a Gabriel Rashard High School outside of Ann Arbor. There's a Gabriel Rashard High School in Riverview. There are several elementary schools and institutions around the state with the Rashard name. He, I call the father of the Sauk Trail. The Sauk Trail is an Indian trail originally. And the Sauk Indians annually from Wisconsin, from Illinois, came across this trail to get their tribute from the British. The British were friendly with a number of Indian tribes, and they brought them together and spent a week. The whole tribe came over on that trail that you see marked out. The highway does not necessarily follow exactly the trail, but it does not deviate more than 5 miles off the original Native American trail. Father Rashard was born in 1767 in France. He became a Sulpician priest. Sulpician is an order in the Catholic Church. He came here into this country in 1792. At that time, the reign of terror was occurring in France, the French Revolution. And those persons who were clergy persons were not seen in the good light, and they were at risk. Many of them came to this country following other French men. Father Hennepin, Father Charlevoix, we call him Charlebois, Father Marquette, La Salle, Joliet. This was part of New France at the time, in the 16 and 1700s. New France was essentially the St. Lawrence River, Toronto, Mount Royal, Montreal, all right? And all of the Midwest down to New Orleans was New France. And we had the French voyageurs. We had a number of priests coming. This was a priest who eventually came to Detroit, all right? Now, let me tell you some things about him. You may recognize the form of the sculpture. And let me give you a little history. The sculptor, his name was Leonard Jungwirth, Jungwarth. Do we have any Michigan State people in the audience? Whoever have attended Michigan State? Only one? Oh, come. Really? How many have been on the campus of Michigan State? Do you ever see Sparty? Yeah. Okay, same sculptor. This exact same sculptor in the 1940s did both Sparty and this one. Now, those of you who have seen Sparty know that he's holding a helmet in his right hand. And the myth, the story is, when a virgin graduates from Michigan State, he's going to put his helmet on. Well, he hasn't done it yet. He came to Baltimore, port of entry. He then was assigned to Kaskaskia. If you look at your Northwest Territory map, the Northwest Territory map, and look where the Mississippi River is, and look where St. Louis is. Do you see it? And right above St. Louis, you see Kaskaskia. That was an Indian community when he came here in 1792. That's where he was assigned. In 1798, he came to Detroit. He was assigned as a priest to St. Anne's du Detroit Church, St. Anne's of Detroit. St. Anne, when Cadillac founded Detroit in 1701, the first building inside the fort was St. Anne's Church, 1701. The current St. Anne's Church, and you'll see a picture of it, is the 8th iteration. And the father was not in the current church, but he was in the 3rd or 4th iteration of that church, St. Anne's. What else about him? He went to Detroit in 1798. He became the pastor, which means the head priest, in 1803. He spent the rest of his life in that parish. He never went back to France. He never saw any of his family ever again. He remained here, and while he was treating those who were ill with cholera in 1833, he succumbed to cholera himself. He is buried in this church that I'll show you. I found that out, and I had to go see where he was buried. several things about him. Number one, he was a priest who established educational institutions in the early 1800s. And the 4 that he established served the Native American population, and 2 of them served girls only. You didn't do that in the early 1800s. Establish schools for Native Americans and girls. Number 2, he brought the first church organ ever in the state of Michigan to St. Anne's. Number 3, he brought the first printing press ever in the state of Michigan to St. Anne's. He published the first newspaper in the state of Michigan in 15. He published the first textbook ever in the state of Michigan. I mean, this man was a Renaissance man of the first order, and yet not too many of us know about him. And I found this out by doing a considerable amount of research. He and a Protestant Presbyterian minister by the name of John Monteith decided to establish in the city of Detroit an institution of higher education. The name of that institution was Cathalopistimiad. Okay, I worked for a month to learn how to pronounce that word. Cathalopistimiad. It existed for 2 or 3 years, and we didn't get a whole lot of interest in it, so they moved that institution to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and it became the U of M. In other words, this father and John Monteith founded the University of Michigan in 1817. Now you've heard all that, and then to top it off, if he can do it, he became the first priest ever to serve in the U.S. Congress. In 1823, he ran for to be a delegate to Congress. I use that term advisedly. Michigan did not become a state until 1837, but it was the territory of Michigan, a legal entity, which started in 1805, and you could send a delegate, non-voting, to the Congress in the House of Representatives. He was the first priest ever to serve. He served one term, 1823 to 1825. In 1824, he gave his one and only speech. He was allowed to do that as a delegate. The only thing he could do was not vote. So, he gave one speech, and that was tomb was. This is, it's not very clear, but that is a bust of Father Rashard. Here is his tomb, and that's his casket in there. He died in 1833. And the maintenance man said, "Do you want to see Father Rashard?" I said, "Not particularly." He said, "If you look very carefully in between the boards in that coffin, you can see some of his bones."
Oh my gosh.
I chose not to do that. But he is an amazing, amazing piece of Michigan history. Now, this trail we're going to go on now is called the US 12 Heritage Trail. US 12 first ran across from Ypsilanti to Jackson, to Battle Creek, Kalamazoo, Paw Paw, Hartford, and then went down to Benton Harbor. And you'll notice in the map, and I forgot to mention it, the Territorial Road, the original 12, stops in Benton Harbor. Right? If you look at that map, you'll see it stops there. And I wondered, why stop there? The answer is this. That was stagecoach. When you got to Benton Harbor, first of all, you were darn tired. It would take about 5 days to get to Benton Harbor on the stagecoach. Okay? So what you did when you got to Benton Harbor was get on a lake steamer. And you went across to Chicago and Milwaukee and wherever you wanted to go. Much easier ride, much more pleasant than a stagecoach. You know, on a stagecoach there were one of two tickets. You were either first class or second class. The difference was if the stagecoach got stuck, which it did often, the second class passengers had to get out and push. The first class passengers didn't. Okay, now this highway officially is known as the Iron Brigade Highway. Little trivia. You say, what is the Iron Brigade Highway? The Iron Brigade Highway is named after the Iron Brigade, which consisted of 3 Wisconsin regiments, an Indiana regiment, and the Michigan 24th. They fought in all the major battles of the Civil War. At the Battle of Gettysburg, the casualty rate for this brigade was 80%. 80% of this brigade either was killed or wounded at Gettysburg. And by the way, that sign you saw, that's at the Welcome Center as you come across from Chicago when you come into Michigan. Stop there sometime and see the history. It's really quite an interesting place, and the bathrooms aren't bad. It could be. I'm going to tell you about this man. His name is Casimir Pulaski. He was a Polish nobleman. He was a cavalryman. He met Benjamin Franklin in Paris and wanted to come to the United States to fight in the Revolutionary War. Ben Franklin recommended him to George Washington. He came, fought in the Revolutionary War, and was chief of all cavalry in the United States during that war. He died in battle in Savannah. Now, there are many Pulaski highways and cities and towns and villages. There is a Pulaski holiday in Chicago even today, Pulaski Days. Pulaski Highway, Casimir Pulaski name is in probably every state where he served. There is a Pulaski, Michigan. It is southwest of Jackson, about 15 miles. It is a township. I've been there. Not many people have. Not many people live there. Sauk is usually spelled S-A-U-K. But there is some evidence that it's also spelled S-A-C. This plaque was in Valparaiso, Indiana. My daughter lives there. We were driving to see the kids' soccer game, and I said, "Stop the car." She said, "What for?" She said, I just saw a sign with the Old Sauk Trail. The Sauk Trail went through Valparaiso. We are now at the corner of Michigan Avenue and Washington Boulevard in the city of Detroit. This is where our journey starts, and we're going to get done in half an hour. We're going to go quick. You're going to have to take notes. On the motel across from the Book Cadillac Hotel is the first marker I've ever seen in Detroit with respect to the Chicago road. The road was surveyed in 1825. Whoops. Well, that was a quick reading of the Chicago road sign. I won't go back because I got to go over there to do it. Okay. Now, here are some sites along US 12. Okay. Now, those who like baseball will know what this is. What was there? And what was it before the Tiger Stadium? Briggs Stadium. And what was it before that? Navin Field. Yes, sir. Before that, it was a cow pasture. This was taken about 5 years ago when they were tearing it down. But this is what it looked like at one time. This is Old Tiger Stadium. At the corner, Ernie Harwell would say, and he was talking about the corner of Michigan and Trumbull. Now, not too far away is this huge building. Anybody know what it is? Sir? Yes? Yes? Mark?
Michigan Central Station.
Michigan Central was the name of the train tracks that went through here. Now, I want to point out to you, and by the way, this has been condemned. You can't go there anymore. You can see the fence along the side. Actually, the depot is right here. This is an office building. Has nothing to do with the train at all. This is where the depot is. It's about 3 stories high. It was built on the pattern and the architectural style of a Roman bath inside. It was quite grand in its day. This is an 18-story building. It doesn't have any windows anymore. 500,000 square feet of office space here. It was completely and fully occupied for many years. At one time, at its height, there were 11 sets of train tracks running through that depot. It was a major metropolis in terms of train service. Michigan Central. Now we're on the trail, okay? We are now going west, and you can follow us as we go along. There are 3 types of heritage highways in the state of Michigan: historic, scenic, and recreational. This is a historic trail, and it has been for about 15 years. Interestingly enough, I was on I-69. You know where that is, going to Coldwater off I-94? You go down there, look next time, it'll say Heritage Route recreational. And I have yet to see any recreational facilities on I-69. I don't know where it comes from. You'll see a bunch of history on this road. Okay, here we go. This is in Ypsilanti, Michigan Avenue, the old Chicago road dedicated to the pioneers of Michigan by the Ypsilanti Federation of Women's Clubs. As you go down this highway, you're going to see markers and stones all honoring the Sauk Trail. This is one of them. And all those, except those who were markers and signs made by the state of Michigan, all the markers you're going to see were put there by women's clubs. Almost every single one. And in particular, the DAR. You'll see several of them. Now, why would I show you the powertrain plant of General Motors? Here's why. When that plant was built, this is outside of Ypsilanti, east of Ypsilanti about 5 miles, on US 12. This was a Ford plant. The plant was devised by Albert Kahn, the great architect, particularly of large buildings and industrial plants, K-A-H-N. He designed this plant, which is in back of here. I mean, you can't take a picture of this plant. Now, this was a car manufacturing Ford facility up until December the 7th, 1941. What happened? The war. And we still call it that, don't we? The war. It's still interesting. We've had 6 or 7 of them since, but it's still the war. I find that very interesting. Ford had a contract then to build what? B-24s. This was known, when I was a kid, I was born in 38. My grandchildren thinks that's 1838. All right. This was the bomber plant. B-24s were built and reconditioned here. From 1942 to 1945, essentially 3 years. 4,200 people worked at this plant. There were so many of them, they built an expressway into Detroit. It's called the Detroit Industrial Expressway. It's now part of I-94. When you get to Ypsilanti, okay, going toward Detroit, there's a big left-hand exit. That's where it started. And it went to Rawsonville Road. It was the first expressway in the state of Michigan. Now I-94. But it's been there since 1942. That's 72 years. It was built to help people get to and from work and to bring parts from the Rouge plant, which was another Ford plant. FDR called Detroit the arsenal of democracy because jeeps and ammunition and guns and airplanes and tanks, particularly tanks, Chrysler built tanks at the Warren Tank Command. And in 3 years at this plant, those workers built 8,700 B-24s. An amazing feat. When it was working at top capacity, they turned out a bomber every hour. Can you imagine? Turning out a bomber every hour. And then they would fire it up, they'd run it up and down the runways, they'd take it for a flight, bring it back, and send it to the Air Force, Army Air Force, around the world. 45% of all B-24s were built here. Now we're coming to, outside of Ypsilanti, is Saline. I always wondered why. Now, if you did not know that was a city's name, but you saw the word S-A-L-I-N-E, how would you pronounce it? Saline. It's the solution when you have a surgery. They stick it in your, they did when I had my lobotomy anyway. That's a saline solution. Why is this saline? Doesn't seem right. Well, I'll tell you why. I don't know why it's mispronounced. Maybe that's the French pronunciation. But south of Saline, about 5 miles, is a salt spring. Saline. That's where the name comes from. Whoops! You just saw the Davenport house. It's in Saline. If you've ever been by it, it's huge. It takes 1 city block. It cost $8,500. Second Empire is the architecture, and it's quite a grand building, but it's private. You can't go there. This used to be the Schuyler Flour Mill in Saline. Weller's bought it, company, but the person who occupied it after it was a flour mill, was a fellow by the name of Ford, Henry Ford. Henry Ford decided to do a couple of things. First of all, he contracted with 700 farmers in the area and bought soybeans. And right here, he also put in, right here, you can't see it, a turbine to make electricity because this was on the Saline River. And you can see from the back, you can see the mill race down here. And here's that turbine. And this became, along with it, the outbuilding, this is the place where you made plastics. Plastics come from soybeans, soybean oil. Okay? And so he wanted to corner the market, and he did. And this now is a reception and a wedding hall and so forth. Still open, still available. Now in Saline, I ran across a rock. See, whenever there's a plaque or a rock or something on the highway, my car automatically puts on the brakes. So I saw this rock, and I thought there's got to be a story. And there is. Orange Risden. What a first name. Orange. He was the primary surveyor on the Sauk Trail after Father Rashard got that $3,000 to do a survey. He was the surveyor, and this rock has been there. I don't know when it was put here, but in 1827, which is not the correct date. 1825 was when the survey took place. I don't know how they got 27, but this is in Saline, just along the highway. Nothing, there's no special marker to call your attention. Lenawee County, this is my home county. It's the second county in. This is the village of Clinton, Michigan. Where does that name come from? Anybody know? Well, I'll tell you. There was once a governor in New York by the name of DeWitt Clinton. He caused the Erie Canal to be built. His first name was DeWitt. Anybody recognize DeWitt as a name? That's a place name in Michigan. North of Lansing is DeWitt, Michigan, named after the governor of New York, his first name. Clinton was his second name. The Erie Canal had the most major effect, was the major factor in the in-migration of people coming to the Midwest. The opening of the Erie Canal was a major, major event in Michigan's history. The people who came across, prior to that time, if you came by oxen or stagecoach, it would take you 2 months to get here from, for example, Albany. And there are at least 30 city names in Michigan from New England. Okay? I mean, how about Vermontville? Where do you think that name came from? It didn't come from New Hampshire. Okay? What about Plymouth? Is there any more of American name from the East than Plymouth? Rochester, Michigan. Where's the original Rochester, please? New York State. Vermont brought a whole community. Brought the community, not just one or two people. Here we go. In Clinton is the River Raisin, and for those of you who are Michigan historians, you will know that the River Raisin massacre occurred about 20 miles downstream. We're going now into the Irish Hills. This is near Clinton, Michigan.
Not really.
It is west of Clinton, Michigan, 5 miles.
It's only a 3-mile radius of the Irish Hills Towers.
I can't hear you. What?
It's only a 3-mile radius around the Irish Hills Towers.
I'll see you after class.
Okay. I'm from.
You are not going out for recess. This was built in 1830. This is Bauer Manor. when I was a kid, this was a wonderful restaurant. It's now a real estate office, apartment upstairs, and it is on US 12 in the Irish Hills. This is St. Joseph's Shrine. It's in the Irish Hills, all this is. St. Joseph, by the way, how many St. Josephs are there? St. Joseph City, St. Joseph County, St. Joseph River. St. Joseph was the patron saint of all of New France. That's why we have so many St. Josephs. There are 2 St. Joseph rivers in Michigan. And the interesting thing is the headwaters are 10 miles apart in Hillsdale County. Why did the Irish come in the 1840s and 50s? Pardon? The potato famine, absolutely. The great diaspora occurred in that time, and some of them settled here. That's why it's called the Irish Hills. Doesn't necessarily look like Ireland, necessarily, but this is where they settled.
My great-great-grandfather was one of those 20.
Is that right? Wow. You can go for recess. This is the inside of the shrine. It's still active. They still hold services. This is the 13th station of the 14th station of the cross, the crucifix. I show you that because I didn't know this was there. I knew the shrine was there. As I said, as a kid, I played around this area. But what interested me is this right here. It looks like a plaque. And I'm going to show you the close-up. It looks like a book. All right? I want you to, and I'll read it to you. Dedicated July 4th, 1932, in memory of the undaunted faith of the Irish pioneers whose bodies rest in this hallowed ground, and of Father Gabriel Rashard, pioneer missionary who in 1826 sponsored the building of the Chicago Pike, which passes by these sacred premises. I haven't told them that it should be 1825. But here I meet Father Rashard again. And let me tell you, the hairs stand out on my arms because I had no idea that I was going to meet this man on the Sauk Trail. But I met him more than once. Okay, here we go. This is one of the stations of the cross. This is station number 4 up in the Keystone here. I show it to you because of this. If I block this thing out, this would look like a solid wall, solid construction. It's hollow. It is an art form called Tabrejo Rustica. It is a Mexican art form. And this is how all the stations are built. Now it's deteriorating. I was up real close to that, and it's chicken wire with cement surrounding it and then carved. Very interesting. Now we're in Cambridge Junction. That's on your map. This is a major intersection. The Sauk Trail, which is US 12, and the Jacksonburg Road, which is M50 today. M50 is a road from Monroe all the way to Muskegon, and it goes through Jacksonburg. Monroe in its beginning was Frenchtown. Now we're going to move quickly. This is the Walker Tavern. This is a prime example of stagecoach stop along the way. It still exists. This is owned by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. They have programs there. They do reenactments. It's a terrific place. This is what it looks like from the back. Walker Tavern. Stagecoach stops existed every 15 miles. Why? To change horses. If you're going along at 5 miles an hour, which is what a typical stagecoach goes, 5 miles an hour, in 3 hours you got to get new horses. And the thought, you remember the great old westerns when stagecoach racing across the prairie at 30 miles an hour? Baloney. They didn't go, they may have gone that fast, but not in the Irish Hills. 5 miles an hour was, if it wasn't raining or snowing. MIS is 5 miles away, the Michigan International Speedway. Ha! What are these?
They were built on my grandfather's property. The first one was.
The first one? These are the great observation towers. Okay? I climbed those. It cost a dime or 25 cents back in the day. They were built in 1922. They closed in the late 70s, reopened again in the 90s, and closed for good in 2000. There is now an attempt to resurrect them, refurbish them. Otherwise, they may be torn down. When you went up on those observation towers, and the original one, here's US 12. Right there's the original. This one was called the Gray Tower. But it was also called the Spite, S-P-I-T-E. The original was built here, but the man who built it, the Michigan Observation Company, forgot to buy the property next door. So the guy next door built one 10 feet higher. So the original tower went up 20 feet. There was a war going on for, well, they finally said, this is foolish. Okay? And so there's no competition. In fact, they built the walkway, see it? Between the two. You can't climb them. They've been condemned, but there is an effort to get them in shape again. This is McCourty Park, M-C-C-O-U-R-T-I-E. The most unusual park you will ever see. It's south of Jackson, near Moscow. Looks like a tree, doesn't it? That's cement. That tree is made of cement. Just like back at St. Joseph's Shrine. Same artisans. In fact, the base of this tree rests above a garage. And back in the day when there were cars in the garage, you would see exhaust coming off these. It's true. It's a chimney. It's hollow.
It was a dance hall too.
Yep. There was a cafe, a Rathskeller downstairs, swimming pools, and this man, he was a tycoon, made his money in cement, obviously, had those artisans come up, and they built 17 bridges on this property. I'm going to show you a few of them. Very interesting. That looks solid. That's all. It's empty. I mean, it's hollow, but you can walk across it. Isn't that something? That's made with cement. And believe it or not, there are 2 people in there. See it? Doesn't that look like thatch? It's cement. It's just fascinating. And doesn't this look like rope? That's all cement, and it's all hollow. And it's a public park. You can walk through it any day of the week. If you can read it, this is one of the artisans. It says stone wood. Looks like wood, but it's stone. By, B-Y, Corona. That was his name. C-O-R-O-N-A.
His name was Joe.
Joe Corona. He also made beer. We're in Moscow. Anybody know there was a Moscow in Michigan?
Yep.
This is the old train station, which has been converted into a township hall. And this is the township. It's located in Headwaters Park. Why? Because 3 major rivers all have headwaters within 5 miles. The St. Joe River, the Kalamazoo River, the Grand River, all begin here, right here. Now the St. Joe River, unfortunately, dips down into the state of Indiana, right about White Pigeon. And it comes back up, of course, in Niles. You know, and then empties into the Lake Michigan at St. Joseph, right? Well, if you look at the path of the St. Joe River as it goes through the Indiana, and there's a city down there where it makes a great big turn and comes north into Niles and Berrien Springs. There's a big bend in the river at the south part of the St. Joe River. Hint, hint. That's where South Bend gets its name. The south bend of our river. Okay, now we're going into Jonesville. So once again, my car comes to a screeching halt, and I see a plaque. I didn't know it was there, so I read it. I meet the man again, and I did not know this was going to happen. The original highway was 112 when it was numbered, but when 12 went out of commission through Kalamazoo, 12 as a number went down to the Sauk Trail. And another little trivia. This is 112. It was 112. A 3-digit U.S. highway will always connect with a 2-digit. 112 will connect with 12. 131 outside our fair city will connect with 31. A 3-digit always connects with a 2-digit. Where does 131 and 31 meet? Pulaski. You go up 131, you come to a dead end, and you are on 31.